Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Courtisans. This is a 2 to 5 player card game that takes 20 minutes to play. Now before I get started on my review of Courtisans, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so setup for Courtisans is going to look a bit like this, where you have this large deck of cards, and if you are playing with fewer than the full complement of players, you're going to remove some of these cards from the deck. You've also got this banquet table, which acts as a kind of a score tracker, because this game does have an element of commodity speculation where cards you collect can be worth positive or negative points depending on the state of play of the banquet table. During setup, each player is going to get one of these dark secret objectives as well as one of these ones, and these can do lots of different things, and of course you'll be keeping these hidden from your opponent and aiming towards them to try and get some bonus points. For example, this one says, at least to get 3 points, you'd have to have at least one card in each family must be below the game mat, as in having all of them across here, or the carps must be fallen from grace. So generally speaking, there's two terminologies. There's esteemed, which means there's more cards above than below, or fallen from grace, which means there's more cards below than above. And of course, I'll touch on the relevance of that shortly. The other cards are things such as this. So, you must own at least 3 spies. You must own fewer butterflies than your left neighbour, and so on. Now, generally speaking, the game flow is very simple, where you'll have 3 cards in your hand, drawn from the deck at the end of your turn, and then you are going to decide how to deploy these 3 cards. Now, you have to deploy each of these cards in different locations, and those locations can either be in front of yourself for your scoring tableau. So in this example, I might want to play this blue card in front of me. You can play them to the banquet table in 2 different ways. So in this example, I might want to play this blue card above the in the esteemed position for the blue faction, meaning that at the moment there are more blue cards above than below, meaning that the card I have in front of me is now worth 1 point. But of course, players might want to start playing them below to make this card worth negative points. Now the third card must be played in front of an opponent, so you can choose which one that is, and you'll have to give this card to them. Of course, you generally want to be giving cards away that are in the fallen from grace position. In addition to those standard cards that I've shown you, some of the cards have special abilities. For example, the nobles here are worth double strength, so therefore if you have one of these, that's going to be worth, +2 or negative 2 points if it's in front of you at the end of the game. These are much more powerful in swaying the council in whether to be esteemed or fallen from grace, and of course you can give them to your opponents if they're worth negative points. You've got the Assassin, which depending on where you play it, it can eliminate a card from that region. So, if I know that my opponent's got a bunch of the blue cards, I no longer want the blues to be worth positive points. I may want to play the red card up here to eliminate the blue card from this area. And again, you can play this in front of yourself to eliminate negative cards, or in front of your opponent to eliminate some of their positive cards. You've got the guarded cards here that with these shields on, which simply protects you from the assassin cards. And you have the spies. Now the spies are cool because they actually are played face down. And again, you can play them in front of yourself, an opponent, or when you play it in the banquet table, you'll place it above or below the queen as to not reveal what suit that is. And at the end of the game, once the decks run out, they'll be revealed and put in their relevant positions like so. And that's essentially how the game plays. You're going to keep on deploying cards. And again, depending on the final position of all the different suits on the board here, you will tally out the points depending on who's got what, and etc. So if there is a particular card that is balanced on either side, like the red one is here, then that particular suit is going to be worth nothing, regardless of how many you have in front of you. And at the end of the game, the player with the most points will be the winner. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Courtisans. And as you could see from the overview there, this is a straightforward game. It's not terribly complex and the rules are straightforward, but sometimes you are presented with some pretty difficult decisions, of course, depending on the cards that you draw. I generally like commodity speculation games because they keep you engrossed in the state of play. And especially in this one, when you are forced to make those decisions, as in playing one card to yourself, one to an opponent, and one to the banquet table. And when you combine that with the special abilities, sometimes you are forced to make those tough decisions, as I mentioned. If all the cards are bad, do you want to maybe start trying to turn the tides by changing a fallen from grace category into a positive one and then start investing in those, considering that your opponents have already given up on them? Or even sometimes you are forced to make kind of the best of a bad decision where all the cards might be worth positive points to everybody. Therefore, you want to try to dilute those out amongst the players and do that kind of mental arithmetic and try to make sure that you're gaining the net gain and winning the overall hand, essentially. I do like the way that works, and I like some of these special abilities in terms of the spies to not give that perfect information at any times, because if you have a very delicately balanced suit, as in like this one here, if one of these hidden cards are fallen from grace and somebody has invested heavily in this one, when it comes to the end of the game, all those points they've collected are going to be worth nothing. So you do need to consider that, which brings the assassins into play, which of course brings the warriors into play with the shields on, and so on. So I do think those extra touches of the special abilities make the game come to life and definitely make it much more interesting for it. And at the same time, the tactical decisions you're making throughout the game might sometimes butt heads with the secret abilities that are divided out at the start of the game as well, because often those cards are given to you with no choice of your own, and that will often conflict with the cards that you're given for those endgame scoring. Now, that being said, I do find that games of this nature tend to have a habit of sorting themselves out. So normally you'll find that each player will kind of invest in one or two types of the suits, or maybe three of the types, and obviously try to increase the value of them and collect those cards for themselves, and of course trying to tank the values of the cards that other players have collected. And once that's kind of sorted itself out, you tend to stick to the game plan and just keep on doing the same thing. So that can sometimes bring the game to a bit of a predictable state of play. I suppose you can deviate from that based on those cards that you are given, but that seems to be a pattern that games like this follow. And that leads me on to probably the biggest critique I have for the game. And this is through experience by playing games that are similar to this. So there are several games that have this mechanism where you are forced to take a card for yourself and give one to your opponent, or multiples to your opponents. But normally when that happens, you are forced to draw one card at a time and make that choice on the spot. Whereas this one, you have to draw all three and then make that decision with more information, I suppose. Now, I actually prefer the other way, where, with each card that you're presented with, you have to make that choice. And it gives this kind of push your luck mechanism where you think, oh, this card's fantastic, but there could be an even better one later. So am I going to risk giving this one to my opponent? Am I going to keep it for myself and maybe draw an even better one that I'm forced to give to my opponent later? And so on. So the game that springs to mind with that mechanism is Biblios. I think Biblios has quite a similar feel to this. Biblios has an extra stage or two involved, but I definitely think that the improved version of that mechanism is by doing one card at a time rather than having all three in your hand at once and being forced to make that decision with more information at hand. It actually makes it much more tense and much more exciting by doing one at a time. The interaction for this game is generally quite good because, of course, the state of play is always in flux. I think the interaction is much better when it comes to the higher player counts because there is more cross-contamination and crossover with the other players, because you and maybe multiple opponents might want to boost or crash a certain card type. And you can even maybe invest or even give cards away to other players to try and put them under a bit of pressure to try and jack up those prices, which you will benefit from as well. But that doesn't quite shine through as much with 3 players or 2 players, because again, it's a bit more transparent about what players are going for, and you'll stick to that aforementioned game plan. The pacing for the game is very good. The box does say it's a 20-minute game, and that is accurate. There is next to no downtime with this one, no scope to lose interest, and it kind of doesn't not outstay its welcome at all. So it definitely fills that category of a filler game very well. And production-wise, I really do appreciate the look of these cards and the artwork. They're very nice sized cards. You can see that these cards have this kind of gilding on, which looks fantastic. It has this kind of old school Disney-esque artwork, which looks fantastic for this kind of fantasy kingdom artwork with a big banquet table. The mat is fabric, which is a strange choice, but I'm not against it. So all in all, I'm very happy with the production. Comes in a nice, sleek little box. So yeah, no complaints at all. In fact, it looks very, very nice. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Courtisans. And, I think this game is adequate. I think it does what it says it does. It keeps the game very simple, and it stays true to one core mechanism. And generally speaking, I do like commodity speculation, and it does shine through a lot stronger when you are playing with 4 or 5 players. As I mentioned, there is more cross-contamination with the other players, and it makes those choices a bit more interesting. Now, sadly, and this tends to be a reoccurring comment from me, there are games out there that do a better job with this mechanism than Courtisans does. Now, the game I'm thinking of is Biblios. I would highly recommend picking up Biblios over this one because those choices are much more tense, especially because you have to make one choice at a time rather than having all the cards at hand at all times. Now, I appreciate you could probably house rule that, and it would probably improve the game actually, but I think why would you have to house rule it when there's a better game already out there with some additional bells and whistles as well. Now, that being said, I do think a lot of people will like this one. It is a true filler game. It is only 20 minutes. It looks lovely on the table. You can have some good swings of momentum by converting one from fallen to esteemed, whatever it's called. So yeah, there are sometimes those swings of momentum, but generally speaking, things will start to sort themselves out and you'll know what you're going for. You generally have a ballpark figure about what your opponents are going to go for and so on. Yes, the spies do spice it up a little bit, but if you're going to heavily invest in something, then that's normally not going to be quite enough to turn the tides. But still, not a bad game by any means, but I think it's just suffering because there are other games out there that I would rather play than this one that do very similar things. So for that reason, I can't really recommend Courtisans, despite looking wonderful on the table.